This is Part 2, Episode 162. Right now, the spectating powerhouses were all in complete shock. Even Li Jingji, whose elemental comprehension was exceedingly high, also had difficulty to understand just what happened in the previous clash of power between Haochen and Yang Haoyu. Perhaps only the legendary Chen Zidian had some clues of what happened, his face right now seeming full of appreciation. Yang Haoyu did not keep launching attacks, but looked at Long Haochen with a questioning look. Just how did you manage that? With your current cultivation and domain comprehension, there should be no way you could resist in front of my star domain. It looked as though the two of them kept making moves, but in reality, it was entirely a contest between their two domains. Yang Haoyu's attack was through his domain, whereas Long Haochen's first block used the divine snail shield, while the second one used entirely the power of his domain, the same going as well for the small blade projection he had launched afterwards. And in this clash of domains, it was Yang Haoyu who finally took the first step back. Although no winner emerged, Yang Haoyu had visibly suffered a slight loss. Long Haochen had a slight smile. Senior star domain really expanded this junior's horizons. That's really the most powerful domain I have ever encountered, indeed unaffected by the restrictions of the light god's laws. But you forgot something. Starlight is light as well, and even if the star's power accumulated inside was even more massive, its core contains a large amount of light. Just like your ability uses light as its core, my light god domain harmonizes very well with all light. So I just made use of the light inside your domain to transform my power into a state able to contend with your domain, to barely resist. In some sense, I have partly been making use of your own power to contend against you. Yang Haoyu displayed a look of surprise, slowly nodding. What a strong light god domain. In terms of quality, it looks that your domain is really miles above my star domain. When the time comes and it gets strengthened enough, the demon god emperor's black hell will have met quite a match. But this match is just getting started. Your domain should have materialized quite recently, right? You will need to display far more to contend with my star domain. My star domain is not my power alone, but the power emerging from the fusion between my starry sky mythological beast and myself. Therefore, my domain is essentially a mutated domain, equivalent to the fusion of two domains. My full power is close to the starry sky, but what you have been facing just before was merely the most fundamental power of the star domain. I am going to increase the pressure right now, take care. Yang Haoyu completely had the attitude of a senior giving guidance to a junior, and Long Haochen also had an increasingly deferential look on his face. Indeed, his cultivation had already increased to a considerable level, but the day he reached the 9th step was still quite recent, so he had far from enough experience of the abilities of a powerhouse of the 9th step, as well as practical experience. Of course, he could easily respond to an opponent of lower cultivation than him, but an opponent stronger than him would be somewhat hard to cope with. If Yang Haoyu had used his strongest attack from the beginning, Long Haochen was afraid he'd be helpless in front of it. But him gradually increasing the level of pressure brought Long Haochen an extremely precious practical experience against domains, as well as extremely good benefits to his future cultivation due to the high level of pressure. Please guide me, senior. Long Haochen knocked lightly the aria of the goddess of light on his shoulder as a salute. Yang Haoyu returned the salute, raising the heavy sword in his right hand and holding it up in the air, declaring in a deep voice, I will start to display my own domain technique next, which I created using the abilities of my starry star mythological beast alongside my own, called Starry Sky Explosion. Take care, and show me how much light your light god domain can strip from mine under these circumstances. Through the heart of eternity, Long Haochen managed to control his domain to some extent, but the light god domain was really a supreme existence among all extant domains. To achieve control over a domain of such a level surely would require an astronomical spiritual energy. Long Haochen obligatorily required the amplification of the divine unicorn to achieve complete control of the domain. Of course, as his understanding of the light god domain would deepen, this situation would change to some extent, until he would manage, upon completely integrating the light god domain, to fuse it into a part of his body, while also becoming part of the light god domain itself. That point could be called to achieve perfect control of his own domain, just what Yang Haoyu managed to do with his own domain. The gathered domain light revolved around the aria of the goddess of light, as a halo lit Long Haochun's body, and he pointed the aria of the goddess of light forward. Distributing the previously condensed halo ahead, it enveloped the incoming star. That star's flying speed increased continuously, and when it looked about to enter the light god domain, the halo guided by the aria of the goddess of light came to meet it, immediately stopping its advance. An unimaginable situation occurred. That slowed down star suddenly froze, expelling all the light in it, but without leaving Long Haochun's light god domain the slightest chance to absorb its light. That instant, that star suddenly blew up. Rumble. The violent explosion reverberated not only throughout the whole Alliance's great stadium, but even shook the whole holy city. The instant it was triggered, the barrier in the Alliance's great stadium shook severely, and large expanses of cracks formed on every corner of the barrier, looking close to shattering at any time. Right at this time, a solemn sound rang, as a golden ball suddenly appeared on top of the barrier, following with countless brilliant lights, shrouding the barrier in the 7 colors of the rainbow, then turned into 8 colors. This finally stabilized its state and stopped the barrier from shattering. Spiritual pellet. That golden ball was really Chen Zidian's spiritual pellet. He wouldn't easily display the use of his domain for fear of affecting the other people in the stadium, so he could only make use of his spiritual pellet to stabilize the defense of the stadium. Inside the stadium, Long Haochun and the divine unicorn immediately got expelled by the effects of that star's explosion. Floating in midair, Long Haochun let out a splurt of blood, his light god domain narrowly shattered in a violent shaking. This explosive force is really so terrifying. Is that the power of a domain technique? Long Haochun's internal spiritual energy totaled 290,000, adding to that the amplification from his golden foundation armor and the divine unicorn, his total available spiritual energy was already over 400,000. Although he hadn't reached the 4th rank of 9th step, the spiritual energy he could bring into play was no less. But in front of these explosions, his 7 apertures felt as if sealed, causing the terrible feeling of having his senses stripped. Not only his body, but even his soul experienced the large shaking. Was starry sky explosion such a terrible thing? The current Long Haochun was full of deep shock. Never did he expect Yang Haoyu's domain to actually reach such a terrible level of power. Because he was unfamiliar with the opponent, and because Yang Hao was also a powerhouse of the Night Temple, so far Long Haochun had maintained a probing attitude in this battle. This was also why he chose to take the first blow of the star domain with the divine snail shield instead of meeting it with his domain's power. And, right now, he got a true view of the terrible level of strength the domain ability could reach. The actual terror of a domain ability's destructive power was far above a forbidden spell. If the barrier specially prepared for defending Alliance's great stadium wasn't there earlier, they could be afraid a calamity would have befallen the whole holy city. However, Long Haochun was not discouraged so simply. Quite the opposite, something seemed to awaken in his body in front of this massive pressure. Taking a deep breath and stabilizing his body and staring at Yang Haoyu, Long Haochun did not wipe the blood on the corners of his mouth, and his look became even more calm than before. The light god domain once again retracting to an area of 10 meters diameter around him, Long Haochun took a deep breath, seemingly drawing all the light into his body. The 2 swords in his hand were slowly brought together above his head, and when the 2 divine swords flowed into each other, a terrible flash of white light surged out from them. Immediately, that white light turned multicolored, before turning into an incandescent white. The 2 swords' harmonious bond drew in a power that had initially even caused the demon god emperor to sigh in admiration. But this harmonious use of the 2 swords seemed to be only aiming at controlling his light god domain. Life and creation, a new mystery behind light god domain. Long Haochun's eyes similarly turned into an incandescent color, as he held the sword of life and creation in his hand, the light god domain extending once again immediately. Where it passed, the star domain was unable to resist, making a losing retreat little by little. With a wave of Yang Haoyu's right hand, this time 2 stars came flying at Long Haochun. If these 2 stars were to detonate, the resulting might was bound to increase by several-fold. White light circulated freely, as Long Houchen's light god domain suddenly slowed its spiraling speed. Surges after surges of light extended, immediately forming two bands in front of the two concentrations of starlight, slowly making way inside the two stos. Then Yang Haoyu immediately found out that he had lost control of his own domain. The starry sky explosion technique would immediately blow up upon contact with an opposing force, blowing at the core spot of the opponent's force. Triggering the explosion ahead of time was impossible, as at that time, the star was still located in its star domain, that would be akin to attacking himself. But when the star made contact with Long Houchen's light god domain, he unexpectedly lost control, becoming unable to explode it. In other words, Long Houchen had neutralized his starry sky explosion technique. This instant, Yang Haoyu's eyes were full of shock. He did not expect at all that Long Houchen's evolved domain would actually neutralize his domain technique like that. Long Houchen had a different cultivating orientation than Caia. Her method was more inclined to developing her domain technique, because what she inherited was the power of purification of the death god, hence her domain technique would to a large extent increase her offensive strength. After Long Houchen fused with Elux's constitution as a sign of light, his whole being was turned into a part of the light element. The mysteries of light did not relate to slaughters and battle, but with the creation and life brought by light. Because of finding out its true essence, Long Houchen chose this path for himself, the path leading to his domain's evolution. Right now, he was making use of the second form of the light god domain, its evolved form. Life and creations were inevitable and incidental concepts involved in everything. The fantastic changes and connection between these inevitable and incidental things caused the rise of a new ability exceeding the scope of light. The starry sky explosion was certainly powerful and impossible for Long Houchen to block, but through his evolved light god domain, he had the ability to break off this power, and even cause the star domain to fall apart under the effects of the laws of life and creation. Yang Haoyu knew that he had been underestimating this youngster. The latter's understanding of his own domain was perhaps not deep enough yet, but that was still an earth-shattering talent, whose knowledge of light vastly surpassed his own. And right now, this knowledge integrated his domain, thus causing it to complete an evolution. Yang Haoyu's eyes were filled with admiration. He understood that given enough time, this youngster would surely come to surpass him. What a power of life and creation! Then let me show you the last struggle of my domain. Speaking so, Yang Haoyu slowly lifted his right arm, pointing it to the sky. For the first time, his star domain shrank, but kept dispersing stars in the whole process. Long Houchen's light god domain consequently expanded immediately to a great extent. Because even mere dispersed stars could still inflict massive damage to him, his only option was to slowly neutralize these stars' power. From the shrinking domains, a lot of stars gathered on Yang Haoyu. His golden armor was originally very gorgeous, but after the stars were inlaid on it one after another, it gained an incomparable brightness. Self-incarnating domain. Li Jingji lost his voice in alarm, full of shock, followed by a decrepit look on his face. He knew that a hardly closable gap still existed between Yang Haoyu and him. Li Jingji put his greatest hopes on this temple's great gathering, because he had just broken through the 4th rank of the 9th step of cultivation, his internal spiritual energy exceeding 400,000. Not only that, but he had furthermore 2 powerful domain techniques. But after seeing the ability Yang Haoyu displayed, he knew that the unsurpassable gap separating him from this legendary starry sky holy knight was still present. Self-incarnating domain, that was a characteristic ability of the 5th rank from the 9th step, representative of the upgrade to a high-class powerhouse of the 9th step. At this moment, the domain was Yang Haoyu himself, and Yang Haoyu was also his own domain, the domain and its wielder becoming a single entity. This was already a boundary of immortality. Of course, this was not a real immortality, but upon reaching the realm of self-incarnating domain, a human powerhouse's life expectancy would expand to over 500 years. Chen Zidian didn't manage to accomplish this feat, yet Yang Haoyu just did. Long Houchen's light god domain gradually covered Yang Haoyu in its scope, and Yang Haoyu displayed a thin smile on his face. His domain having completely merged with him, this had become a fight inside Long Houchen's light god domain. Waving his swords, Yang Haoyu immediately took the path in front of him. Even the already evolved light god domain was split in front of his swords, which had gained transparency, flickered with starlight, just like his armor, embodying the endless night sky. A bizarre crossed starlight sword strike lacerated the way toward Long Haochen, totally unstoppable by the light god domain. The starlight cross sword strike traveled at very slow speed, but its huge pressure caused Long Haochen's golden foundation armor to issue a series of crackling sounds, with countless cracks starting to show up on the golden foundation armor. This armor of epic tier was actually completely unable to bear such a level of might. The divine unicorn extended its wings, revealing a pained look. Under that huge pressure, its head was lowered forcefully, and the sacred light dispersed from its horn became far weaker. This divine unicorn was, of course, Star King, who evolved along with the rise of Long Haochen's cultivation. It still did not have its own domain, and its uses had been minimized due to the star domain's suppression. Yang Haoyu's strike already made use of most of his domain, compressed to be used in the shape of a technique. This crossed sword's strike could be said to accumulate the power of multitudinous starry sky explosion techniques. Even the light god domain evolved to the boundary of life and creation couldn't possibly dispel such a highly concentrated domain's power. This was the gap in the two parties' cultivation, already going beyond the gap in the two domains' qualities. Ding! With light tingling sounds, Long Haochen instantly chose to discard his own golden foundation armor, turning it back into a golden foundation box dropping down, otherwise it would sustain irreparable damage. Without the armor's protection, Long Haochen's situation of crisis became even more pronounced. The huge might made him unable to even let go of the sword of life and creation in his hands. This was the true might of the starry sky knight. One could say that the process of the previous course of the battle was simply Yang Haoyu giving direction to Long Haochen for the sake of increasing his experience of resisting powerhouses. Yang Haoyu's starlight cross-strike was faster than anything else, striking straight at Long Haochen, but the attack speed was voluntarily lowered rapidly, as the pressure was increased. With the increase in pressure, the rebound would get just as much stronger. With Long Haochen's cultivation, bearing such a pressure would hardly be possible. Yang Haoyu was trying to force out breakthroughs from Long Haochen with the most of his own strength. Such a practical experience would yield indescribable benefits for his future. Long Haochen's body was shivering slightly in the air in front of this devastating pressure, as the harmonious sword of life and creation dispersed dragon-like chants that only kept getting more and more high-pitched. The starlight cross strike was getting nearer and nearer to Long Haochen, and he was still unable to come out with an effective response, much less any shift of movement. Yang Haoyu sighed secretly, thinking to himself, maybe I just held overly high expectations on this child. He is not even 30, yet he already managed to evolve his domain once. What more is there to insist for him to display? The huge pressure started to cause Long Haochen's mouth and nose to splurt blood. If this kept going on, his life would soon get endangered. Right as Yang Haoyu was thinking about terminating his attack, he suddenly caught sight of Long Haochen's eyes. These eyes were just as limpid, with the same peaceful look even under such desperate straits, with even a look of persistence coupled to this gentle expression. He hasn't given up. This was Yang Haoyu's first reaction, and right at this time, he saw a purple glint in his eyes, as a purplish golden luster emanated from within his eyes. 9 purple lines showed up noiselessly on his forehead. Just like torrential waves, purplish golden halations gushed out from Long Haochen's back, instantly turning the white light god domain a purplish golden color. The aura of life and creation disappeared, to be replaced by an incomparable might, an inexhaustible destructive intent. That instant, Long Haochen's aura metamorphosed, the only thing remaining the same being his soft and peaceful look. A huge illusory figure appeared behind him. That was not the goddess of light, as after absorbing Elux's special qualities as sign of light, he was not able to make use of God's descent any longer. That was because his spiritual energy reached the quality of a light god, an existence able to contend with the goddess of light. This huge illusory image was purple-colored, letting out resplendent purple, its 6 immense heads lifted higher, with 2 huge bulges on the extreme sides of the 6 heads, already close to the shape of the other 6 heads. The illusory look of that stature gradually gained in substance, its huge wings unfolding and causing the addition of an incomparable nobility and might to Long Houchen's purplish god-light god domain. Right, his blood vessels had called him out in front of the high pressure and life-threatening crisis confronting Long Houchen. ROA. An overwhelming roar resounded behind Long Houchen. The deep traces of purple intent flared up, turning into a purple halation blowing at Yang Haoyu. Astonishingly, everywhere the purple light passed, Long Houchen's surroundings turned purplish golden color, and that starlight crow's strike came to a stop in midair. One could shockingly see that purplish light extend on the path taken by Yang Haoyu, annihilating an innumerable starlight on its way. Yang Haoyu's swords changed stance, its starlight interweaving into a magnificent star atlas. But all this starlight seemed completely useless in front of that purplish golden halation when dispersed directly. When that purplish light made contact with Yang Haoyu, his body shivered violently, and an illusory golden cloud separated from him, fluttering toward the opposite direction. The sword of life and creation in Long Houchen's hands finally landed, greatly reducing the might of the starlight sword crossstrike, and in the midst of resonating clinging sounds, the crossed swords were split. Long Houchen took advantage of the great momentum to flash forward, the massive image on his back merging with him to turn into a magnificent purplish golden armor. But this purplish gold color was far too overbearing. At the time it stuck onto Long Houchen's body, the divine unicorn was actually expelled far away. How strange to see the divine unicorn not show the slightest resistance at such a time. The multicolored hexagram traced under its feet disappeared quietly, and if one paid careful attention, he would find out that at the time that massive purple figure appeared, even the top-tier divine unicorn looked filled with terror. To the opposite of Long Houchen's magnificent purplish golden armor, Yang Haoyu's starry sky armor and dual swords actually both disappeared. That previous sound of roaring accompanied with the release of a purple halation actually forcefully cut his contact with the starry sky mythological beast. Yang Haoyu was completely filled with shock right now. A second evolution. That was actually a second evolution that took place in his domain. This was impossible. Even a powerhouse of the 9th step, 5th rank, such as himself couldn't accomplish this feat. Only at the 6th or even 7th rank could that possibly be done. He also felt the sense of his companion. That purple halation unexpectedly aroused fear in the starry sky mythological beast known to be the number 1 mythological beast of the starry sky type. Ever since he made a pact with the starry sky mythological beast, it was a first for this to happen to Yang Haoyu. From the start of this battle, Long Houchen was constantly under pressure. The pressure being abruptly lightened, he reflexively took advantage of the momentum to launch an attack. Right now, the light god domain was in an extraordinary state, but that was actually not a second evolution. Just like the armor materialized on Long Houchen's body, that came from Haoyu's power. That 6-headed purple figure was no one else but Haoyu, who had nearly died alongside Long Houchen, and had gone into hiding for over 5 years. That deep purple halation was Haoyu's bloodline power. Just like Long Houchen's cultivation rose to the 2nd rank of the 9th step, Haoyu also made considerable progress, greatly gaining in volume to now be over 30 meters long. All his scales were like glistening amethysts, but actually, his cultivation only reached the peak of the 8th step. But, assessing Haoyu could naturally not be done with such simple factors alone. Those 2 huge bulges seemed to possibly be about to form heads at any time. The 6-headed Haoyu already reaching the peak of the 8th step. If he were to grow 2 more heads to gain 8 heads, just what level would he reach? Even Long Houchen himself did not dare imagine. Also, because Haoyu's latent capabilities only kept growing stronger and stronger, Long Houchen's curiosity regarding his origins only kept growing. Assimilating Haoyu's blood force, Long Houchen also felt a spurt of the power coming from Haoyu's blood force into his own body too. The light god domain, which was ordinarily gentle, gained nobility and might. To life and creations were added ounces of devastation and destruction. These 2 extremes coming out from Haoyu's powerful blood vessels integrated the whole perfectly. Haoyu was certainly not as powerful as Long Houchen right now, but the level reached by his blood vessel's power was not even bearable for the starry sky mythological beast, which separated itself from Yang Haoyu's body, causing Yang Haoyu's star domain to lose balance immediately. In the midst of this disturbance, Long Haochen's attack raised to its strongest degree of strength. The heart of eternity pulsed vigorously, and the purplish gold-colored divine swords released an unprecedented luster, filled with domineering sword intent and also carrying a purplish golden glint while elevated high. This instant, his sword soul and sword intent made one, and caused Long Haochen to instantly arise to his peak state. However, Yang Haoyu did deserve his reputation after all. The starry sky mythological beast separated from him only for a split second, before returning to cover his body. But the star domain was weakened slightly, while Long Haochen's agile attack carried an earth-shattering power. With a shout, the swords in his hand traced an abstruse arc, gathering myriad starlights as one to clash with Long Haochen's powerful strike. This clash looked unimportant, but in the Night Temple's lounge, it caused great changes in the expression on Chen Zidian's face. His figure flashed to reach the top of the defensive barrier, and he shouted loudly, "Full power to support the barrier, everyone." Those two's blows sprang up to the barrier. This clash contained the full power of the two of them, already exceeding the level of normal domains. They seemed to have actually forgotten that this was a match taking place in the temple's great gathering. A clash reaching their level was already beyond what the divine tool-level defensive barrier could sustain. And in case it shattered, perhaps the whole holy city would get affected, especially the numerous crowds standing outside. A real blast out would really turn this match into an unprecedented calamity. Chen Zidian did not stop them all this time, because he was very familiar with Yang Haoyu, hence fully aware of the height of his cultivation, knowing that he's a really proper person. But who could guess that Long Haochen would suddenly summon another magical beast, before uniting with him and actually severing the link between Yang Haoyu and the starry sky mythological beast. This inflamed Yang Haoyu's competitiveness, resulting in this clash of maximal power. If it were let to burst out, even among the higher-ups from the 6 great temples, perhaps only a few of those inferior to the 9th step would remain. Being the chief referee, how could he let such a situation take place? His first reaction was to immediately asking for help, as the defensive barrier was their only means to unite their strengths at once. Hearing Chen Zidian's large shout, the higher-ups from the 6 great temples almost all set into action with no hesitation. Li Jingji was the first one to react, pressing both his hands onto the barrier to pour his spiritual energy inside. This barrier was extremely mystical. Aside from pouring spiritual energy inside through the magic array, it was also possible to pour it inside directly. However, it would just not have the same amplifying effects as through the array. The temple's great gathering was a contest between the greatest powerhouses of the temple alliances, where all kinds of accidents had already occurred. Such a defensive barrier strengthening had been formally employed in earlier temples' great gathering. For instance, the sign of samsara of the past had narrowly caused it to get totally torn to shreds. Although the defensive barrier of the temple's great stadium covered a very large area, the manpower to sustain it was also enormous. Right now, the collaboration of all powerhouses from the 6 great temple instantly strengthened it to an enormous degree. An earthquake-like shaking immediately broke out. The area within was already filled with a myriad of flowing lights of every color. Long Haochen and Yang Haoyu's figures were completely submerged in that magnificent light, and the massive shaking was already implicating the whole holy city, just like a real earthquake. The defensive barrier could sustain severe blows, because the ones sustaining it had come flying from all the lounges, reaching at least the 8th step of cultivation. Yet they were sent flying one after another by the huge shock. The whole barrier flickered in multicolored light. Everyone could sense a terrifying might surging inside the barrier. Letting it burst out would cause devastating damage to spread. The defensive barrier could resist the shocks from spiritual energy, but no one was able to cover the surface underneath it. So right now, it started to split from below, causing the whole temple's great stadium to sway violently, some cracks starting to form on its floor. Right this time, a multicolored golden light instantly came in midair. As that golden light gained in scale, it covered the whole floor of the Alliance's great stadium, before slowly spreading downwards to start to cover the whole great stadium. The shaking of Holy City stopped at last, but because of the substantial damage caused by this light, the roof disappeared totally. That was a pagoda, flickering in golden light spilling all over the air. On this pagoda were countless golden inscriptions, letting out lustres of various colors. That 7-floored pagoda seemed just large enough to cover the surface of the Alliance's great stadium, as well as the whole defensive barrier. The instant it landed onto the ground, the earthquake-like shocks were finally contained. Everyone outside of the Alliance's great stadium was already in a great panic. Every broadcasting magical crystal had been broken into pieces, and the masses were filled with shocking terror. Fortunately, that terrifying earth-shaking, as if a mighty dragon rolled over, disappeared after only continuing for a very short time. Seeing the immense tower that had risen up in the midst of that split Alliance's great stadium, gasped shouts arose immediately from the people. Kia calmly remained afloat, stretching her right hand in front of her with her palm spread out. This crushing presence in the midst of the stadium was with no doubt the Tower of Eternity. The current Tower of Eternity was completely different from before. It seemed much less mystical, appearing closer to a genuine divine tool. Although it didn't reach the level of a supra-divine tool, it had a space-shuttling ability, and moreover, an exceeding defensive power. Before the holy necromancer Elux got purified, it had already acknowledged Kia as a master, acting right now as an attacker and defender with a spatial teleporting ability at Kia's disposal. The Tower of Eternity issued light chirping sounds, which lasted for a long time, before gradually calming down. A bright light flashed out from Kia's chest, as her right hand was waved at the Tower of Eternity. The Tower of Eternity flew 20 meters upwards before shrinking rapidly, landing back in Kia's hands, to finally turn into an intricate golden jewel 25 centimeters long, returning to her palm. Kia lifted her wrist, the eternal melody flashing on her waist, as the Tower of Eternity disappeared without traces into the shape of countless strands of light, and her gaze shifted impatiently back to the direction of the stadium. Right now, the stadium had already recovered its calm. No damage was sustained by the barrier in the end, and the higher-ups from the 6 Great Temple, with the duty of maintaining the barrier, gathered back one by one, with a lot of people looking at Caia. Without the previous suppression by the Tower of Eternity, although it wouldn't have gone to the extent of Holy City getting really endangered, that situation, like a dragon attack, would certainly have caused a massive disorder to arise in Holy City. The ground of the stadium seemed plowed. The whole ground was dug up with Long Haochen and Yang Haoyu standing on the only 2 intact pieces of land. Long Haochen fell onto the ground, using his 2 heavy swords to support his body, looking quite pale, and having traces of blood flow in the corner of his mouth. But one could clearly see a powerful bright light shining on his chest, indicator of the pulse of the heart of eternity recuperating a large amount of light essence. Although Yang Haoyu was still floating, he looked quite wretched, his hair being in complete disorder and the starry sky armor on him having already disappeared. Chen Zidian was gasping for breath. For the sake of maintaining the defensive barrier, he had just expended too much. The 2 of them couldn't help but gasp in silence when looking at the same direction. I have lost. Long Haochen and Yang Haoyu looked at each other, declaring this stance almost simultaneously. Chen Zidian had a questioning look. Without leaving the time for Long Haochen to explain himself, Yang Haoyu declared, I had a slight advantage in the previous clash, but your spiritual energy recovery speed is far greater than mine, and you can moreover summon the divine unicorn back to support you for the rest of the battle. The probabilities of you winning are far greater. No need to say more, I am conceding. After saying this, his figure flashed out as he took the leave to walk out through the defensive barrier. Long Haochen looked full of appreciation. He knew that Yang Haoyu was acting on purpose. He was actually the losing side. His latent capabilities were completely squeezed out by Yang Haoyu. If Yang Haoyu had been attacking with all his power from the start, he would have lost long ago. Even the last clashes were actually at Yang Haoyu's advantage. Even if he were to really attempt killing the opponent, Long Haochen would still only be at most able to